Alright everyone, welcome back to B Mother Reviews, and today we've got the man without fear, Daredevil from Iron Studios. And after I saw this statue at San Diego Comic-Con in 2019, where it made its debut, I thought to myself that this had potential to be one of, if not the best, Daredevil statues made to date. So now, about a year and a half later, I've got it in hand. Does it deliver on those expectations? We'll find out in the review next. Alright, the Devil of Hell's Kitchen, Matthew Murdock, has really become a staple in the Marvel Universe since his debut in this issue right here, Daredevil #1 from back in 1964. Now, I think we're all pretty familiar with his origin story. In a heroic act of bravery, he rescues an old blind man from getting hit by a truck, but in doing so, was doused with radioactive chemicals, ironically robbing him of his own sight, but it also enhanced his other senses to superhuman levels. His sense of touch is so fine that he can sense the ink on a page and read a regular book like he's reading Braille. He can track and identify people from their scent. He can taste all the ingredients in the food that he eats. He can hear heartbeats across the room and sense whether or not people are lying, which is an incredibly useful ability for his day job as a defense attorney. He also has this sort of sixth sense, a radar sense, that allows him to pinpoint the location of people and objects all around him so precisely that it's almost like an alternate form of vision. Now, you combine all those abilities, and it also gives him this incredible control over his own body, as this amazing sense of balance and agility and speed, and then you couple that with his signature weapon, the Billy Club, and its internal cable and grappling hook, and he's often seen performing these incredible acrobatic flips around Hell's Kitchen, much like fellow New York-based crime fighter Spider-Man. Now, all of that sounds really awesome, but the Daredevil book in the late 1970s was really struggling until in comes now legendary creator Frank Miller. And that series really launched him to stardom, and because he really revamped the character. And it's really good reason that it has become sort of the definitive run for the character. It introduced us to Elektra, his sensei Stick, who's also blind, but taught Daredevil his ninja training and how to use his radar sense. It brought Bullseye in as a prominent villain, and also brought in the Kingpin, who up until that point was really more of a Spider-Man villain, but since then has become the most iconic arch enemy for Daredevil. Now, it's no secret that Daredevil is my personal favorite character, so I say this with maybe a little bit of bias, but I think the Daredevil books have been the most consistently well-written and well-drawn books in all of comics since the start of Daredevil Volume 2, which debuted in 1998 as part of the Marvel Knights line, and that kicked off with a short run by Kevin Smith, followed up by the epic Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev run. Then we had Ed Brubaker take a run at it. That led into Shadowland, followed by a bit of a more lighthearted and refreshing run by Mark Waid. Then Charles Soule took over and kind of brought him back into the dark doldrums of vigilante justice. And the current run by Chip Zdarsky and drawn by Marco Checchetto is absolutely stellar. So if you're not reading the Daredevil books, do yourself a favor, pick some up, and find out why I think he's absolutely one of the best characters around. Now, him being one of my favorites causes me to be maybe a little bit more harsh and critical of my Daredevil collectibles. So, does this statue live up to my lofty standards for the character? Well, let's kick off with sculpt and design next. Alright, so before we get too far into this segment, I need to show you all this. This is the original concept art sketch for this statue. It's done by an artist named Daniel Senna, and you can see that they stuck pretty close to their original design with the final piece. And I'm pretty excited to finally have these two pieces displayed next to each other. So this statue here was sculpted by a guy named Tiago Rios, who I think is one of the most talented artists around today. He's got a really nice portfolio you can check out on ArtStation. And he also did one of my personal favorite statues from the last few years, and that's the Iron Studios Punisher. So I think that will pair really nicely with this Daredevil here. So let's start with the base design on this statue. You got the church-themed base, which is quite symbolic for Daredevil. He is a Catholic, so he's often struggling to justify his nighttime skull-cracking ways with his Catholic values and upbringing. So very relevant base for this character, and they did a really great job with it. You see lots of damage. You know, the broken angel wing here. You've got the cherub on the side, and half the face is sheared right off. So again, very symbolic for this character. I think it's an excellent base. I really like this stained glass window in the back that just adds a little bit of color to the base. Daredevil himself, most Daredevil statues, especially the 1/4 ones, have kind of a stylized version of the suit. You're not going to get too many real true classic Daredevils anymore, and this statue is no different. But I think they've done a really nice job, and they've really made good use of texture on this statue. You've got the leather texture down the chest. You've got this dimple texture on the inside of his arms and legs. His boots have a little bit of a ribbed texture there. So they've made good use of that throughout the costume to kind of mix things up and catch your eye a little bit, add some detail. Nice detail on the straps for the holster, the belt, and what good superhero wouldn't have pouches along the side of his belt? So he's got a few of those in the back. I particularly like the mask. I think they did a great job with that. And the portrait overall is excellent. Very realistic. One thing I want to point out about that is the nose, his nostrils. You can actually look up into his nose. He's got these very realistic nostrils. I had to go around and check my other statues, and I just don't have anything quite like that. So very nice, realistic look there. Something a little bit different to point out. A couple things on this costume that will stand out. Number one, the holster here on his right leg typically is shown on his left leg, but it's not unprecedented to be on the right. Even one of my favorite Daredevil artists, Alex Maleev, sometimes draws it on the right. The old Sideshow Comiquette has it on the right. And in fact, the current series draws it exclusively on the right. So I can deal with that, but I totally understand how that would bother some people. The other thing to point out is the boots. He has these traditional tabby boots or ninja boots on that kind of separate the big toe from the rest of the toes. It gives him a little bit of a Ninja Turtle type look, but it is a very traditional Japanese footwear. I haven't had the chance to wear any myself, but apparently they are quite flexible and they have great grip, and they're thought to have been worn by actual ninjas historically. So I think it's kind of a neat idea for this piece, given his ninja background and ninja training. And given the choice between these and the bulky lace-up army-style boots or the high heel type boots that they give the female ninjas sometimes, I'm taking the tabby boots all day, every day. So kind of a neat addition to the piece. But, I mean, let's face it, the feet aren't exactly prominent on this piece. You got one that's hidden right behind the balcony. This one's kind of hidden in the shadow of his knee. So if the boots really bother you, I would say that they really don't stand out very much on this piece at all. So I would give it a chance. So overall, I think this sculpt is absolutely fantastic. I think Thiago nailed it. I love the physique they gave him. He's not too beefy, but he's got a very muscular build still. I like the pose. He's up on his toes. He looks very agile. It's a very good Daredevil pose, in my opinion, and I think they absolutely killed this sculpt. Alright, let's talk about the paint job on the statue. We'll start with the base. It's a fairly basic stone paint job, some grays mixed with some lighter browns. The statues around the base here have a distinctive lighter color. You know, they look like they might be carved out of marble or something like that, but they do stand out from the rest of the base, which I think is nice. I mentioned the little pop of color back here on the stained glass window. I really like that. Daredevil himself, this is where I think this statue could see a little bit of room for improvement. One thing I noticed right when I took it out of the box is that the darker areas of his costume are quite a bit darker than what I remember seeing at Comic-Con. And you can really see that in the back here. There's a very high contrast between the bright and dark areas of his suit, and I'm not a big fan of the color they used for the darker areas. It's kind of a brownish red, looks a little bit like dried blood, which I guess is suitable for Daredevil after a night fighting crime, but you know, I'm not a big fan of that color. Now that's a little bit of a subjective thing, color choice, but I prefer more of a monotone look about the suit. I would like the two different reds to be much closer in tone, but again, that's kind of a subjective thing. What's a little bit more objective is the detailing or the fine detailing on the suit. I really think they could have done a better job with the belts and buckles and straps on this piece. You can see how they painted the belt, for example, a darker red in the front, but they didn't take the time to paint the top edges of the belt. And it's the same thing with the straps, and they didn't seem to take time to detail the buckles and things like that. So definitely an area that could have been improved on this piece. One part of the paint job that I do really like is the skin tones on his face. I think they look very realistic. They're extremely well done. Little hint of a 5 o'clock shadow, and his lips are really nicely done there as well. So great job on the skin. Pretty nice job on the base as well. But I think the suit could have been improved a little bit. Alright, let's move on to production and build quality for this statue. It does come packaged very nice and securely, but there is no assembly guide inside the box. There's no assembly video. I don't think you're going to need it. It's a fairly basic setup and assembly for this piece. It didn't take me very long at all. One thing I will point out though is be careful with the forearms. The magnet between the arm and the glove is a little bit on the weak side. Be careful as you're adjusting the Billy Club cable. I actually pulled the arm right off. It came off very easily as I was doing it, and I very narrowly avoided disaster. So just a word of warning as you're putting yours together. The statue has a really nice quality feel about it. It's got some nice weight about it. The parts, you know, other than the little bit of a weak magnet, all fit together pretty nicely on this piece. I did have a couple minor QC issues on mine to point out. First of all, his head has these kind of strange flat spots, especially on the top back right of his head. I do find them noticeable from certain display angles. Other angles, you don't see them at all. So I'm not sure if that's a defect or if all the statues have that. The other problem I had was a little bit of what looked to be an unfinished factory fix on the front of the angel's hair. So I've kind of fixed that up and repainted the hair for this review, and I think it looks okay, but that's definitely not something you want to see on your brand new statue. So I've taken pictures of those things and sent them into Sideshow. We'll see what they say. But as I said, I think the statue is looking pretty good still, and I'm not going to hold my issues against the entire production run, because from what I've read, most people are really satisfied with what they got, and I think quality-wise, you're probably going to be pretty pleased with this piece. Alright, it's time to wrap up this review of the Iron Studios Legacy Replica Daredevil statue, and I'll start off by saying by no means is this a perfect statue or even a perfect Daredevil statue. I mentioned a couple minor QC issues that I had. I'm not a huge fan of the colors that they used in some areas of the costume. Definitely room to improve on the finer details of the paint job, and a little bit of a weak magnet here on the arm. But despite all that, I think between the design of this statue and the sculpt that Thiago absolutely nailed, those two elements elevate this statue in my eyes to the point where I can say it's easily my favorite 1/4 scale Daredevil on the market, and probably falls within my top 3 favorite Daredevil statues in my entire collection. And I've got quite a few of them, so that is a pretty big accomplishment, at least in my eyes. So I think Iron Studios absolutely delivered for us Daredevil fans. An excellent statue, an excellent representation of the character, and I'm really happy to have this one in my collection. So there you have it, the Iron Studios Daredevil. Hopefully you enjoyed the review. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you guys soon.